Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Keegan, and welcome back to the channel and another episode of Sundown, a one-way Gold Coast Suns conversation. Before we get underway, make sure you like this video, subscribe so you don't miss any of the videos on this channel. And yeah, I had really fun recording last week's episode, so I thought, why not? Let's do another one. So you probably can't see me because I'm doing it more as a conversation, so you don't. So this is more of just a listen in because all you're going to see is a thumbnail over the top. But yeah, without any further ado, let's have a talk. Let's have a good serious talk about how the Suns went last week. So the Suns, 2 wins from 2 games, which is great to see. The Suns at Etihad Stadium beat Carlton, who were 9-13-67 to the Suns 15-11-101. Suns over 100 points, which is great to see. If you haven't had a chance to watch the game or you didn't see the game, the only thing you took from it was that Tom Lynch kicked 8 goals, which is great. But I reckon overall we played really, really well. There are a whole bunch of other people that sort of contributed to that win. So you had the likes of Jared Lyons. He got 36 touches and 6 tackles. Swallow had 24 touches and 8 tackles. You had the likes of, who else? Touk Miller, he had 17 touches, not huge, but he had 8 tackles as well. And then you had the likes of Darcy McPherson playing up forward, small forward. He made 10 tackles. And Holman, who tagged Cripps for the day, had 11 tackles. So it was a whole team performance, but I think Tom Lynch was the cherry on top. He finished it off really, really well. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think it was Tom Lynch's best game. That's his best goal haul, but I think the 7 he kicked against Carlton last year, where he was hitting it on the lead a bit more. He was doing the hard work. I think that was a better game than this one here. He got 4 frees for this game, but he did lay 4 tackles. But I think last week's game for him, last year's game for him against Carlton was better than this one. But still, you can't argue. 8 goals. He's in there to kick goals, so you can't really complain about that. If I'm actually recording this at half time of the Carlton Collingwood game, and to be fair, I would have taken a lot more out of that game until I saw that Carlton are getting absolutely towed up by Collingwood. So it really says how good actually are Carlton. So unfortunately, can't take too. I don't think I can take as much away as I wanted to take away from it now, reflecting on it. But still, I can't complain. 2 wins from 2 games is great. Sort of a few things that we could work on heading into the next game. We probably conceded too many inside 50s. So they had 67 inside 50s to our 50 inside 50. So we were pretty good. We were pretty good going in. We got 26 scoring shots from 50 inside 50. So just over half of the time we went inside 50, we got a scoring shot away. But we conceded 67. And if we concede 67 to a better team, then I think we are in a little bit of trouble. They had more disposals. I'm not too worried about that. Yeah. So overall, it was a pretty pleasing game. 93 tackles is awesome. And that's great to see as well. We've turned the corner. We seem to be more of a physical team, and that's great. Jew's brought a bit of the physical hard edge, which I think I mentioned last week, was Jew bringing in being a bit more physical around the ball. We're starting to play a bit more like Sydney, and to be fair, I'm happy with playing a bit more like Sydney. They're a great team, and if we start to emulate their game style and their game plan, then I'm all for it, because they may not be the most exciting team to watch at times, but they are a physical team and they win games, and you can't really complain about that. Another thing I sort of really, really took from it was the fact that we were challenged. I think it was in the 3rd term. They had a shot at goal that could have brought it into the deficit into under 10 points, but they missed their chance, and then we went down the other end and we scored a goal. I think Jack Martin snapped over his shoulder straight away, and yeah, I was pretty happy with that. That's two weeks in a row now that while we're probably not playing the better teams in the league, we are we are showing that we are a more defensive team. We can block up the contest. We can do a lot as the game goes on, where we can respond. We can respond if they get a bit of a run, and we can stop the bleeding. The Suns over the past couple of years have been known as a team that don't respond well to pressure. Once the other team gets a roll on, we drop our load and they will kick 5-6 goals in a row on us, and we don't get it back. But this time we sort of stopped the bleeding, and we did really well to wind it in, and we went down the other end, scored a goal, broke the momentum, and then from then on we kicked on, which was great to see. So as my 3-2-1 for the game, let's have a look. I think I would give Lynch 3, because 8 goals, you cannot not give him 3. 8 goals for Lynch. I'd give 2 goals to Lions. Let me just read Lions' stats for you, because it's absolutely amazing. So he had 36 touches. He had 27 kicks, 9 handballs, 2 marks, 2 frees for, 1 free against. He had 6 tackles, and he kicked 1 goal. That is a pretty damn good game. And he's had something like, I think it was like 600 or 700 meters gained to those stats. I don't have the meters gained stat to hand, but that is a very, very good performance, and I'm glad that Jared Lyons is playing well and picking up where he left off last year. So I had 3 to Lynch, 2 to Lyons. I'm going to give 1 to Jack Martin, who I finally thought came around a bit. He had a really good game. The first game last week was okay, but I don't think the wet is his kind of guy. I think dry conditions Eddie had is where Jack Martin exceeds, and he kicked 3 goals, had 15 touches. He was a good foil for Lynch. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I think Martin definitely does deserve a mention in there. So Lynch 3, Lions 2, Martin 1. So I don't have last week's votes on hand, but I'm pretty sure I had Lions in the top 2. So I'm going to have a hazard guess and say Lions is leading my Gold Coast Suns Sundown medal at the moment, and that is great to see. I will put that on my Twitter later. I'll go back to my previous episode, and I'll put up the votes on the Twitter. So if you want to check out the votes, I'll put them on my Twitter, and I'll also put them in the comments below. All right, so moving away from last week's game where I thought we played really, really well. Before we move into Fremantle game, I had a question on the last episode of Sundown, and that was someone asking, how did I become a Suns fan? Because as you can probably tell, I'm not 8 years old. Suns haven't been the only team I've ever known. I did have a team before the Suns. And they asked, and I thought it'd be an interesting way, because it's something that a lot of people don't hear about. They don't hear about how when an expansion team or when a new team in their area come in, how do they switch? Why do they switch over? Why don't they show the loyalty to that team before? And it's a fair point. So what I thought I might do is I thought I might run you through what happened with me as coming into being a Suns fan. So before the Suns, I was a West Coast fan, and I lived in Tasmania when I started following football. So I started probably taking notice of football around 5 years old, and that would have been 93, 94. And 94, as you know, is the year the Eagles won their second premiership. So I can't really remember the formulating thoughts behind my mind, but I'm assuming it's because West Coast won the premiership in 94 that I said, I'm going to decide to follow West Coast. And now people will say, you bandwagon. I'm like, as a 5-year-old, it's pretty hard not to bandwagon. You want to be on the team that wins. You don't want to be on the team that's getting absolutely towed up. So I jumped on the West Coast wagon, and I was on the West Coast wagon for 16 years, 17 years. And I was with them for the highs. I was with them for the highs of the 2005-2006 grand finals. I was with them through the lows when we were slumming it towards the bottom of the ladder. But West Coast were usually a pretty successful team. They usually found their way in and around finals. Yeah. So that's how I sort of I was a West Coast fan before. My favourite player growing up was Ben Cousins. I still have a signed photo of Ben Cousins hanging up in my bedroom on the Gold Coast in Australia. And yeah, so I was a massive West Coast fan, and I still sort of keep an interest in what they're doing and how they're going. I usually, if I've got the spare time and they're on TV, I usually sit down and watch a West Coast game, because I still enjoy following them, and I still think they're a pretty good team to watch. I'm hoping they do well this year. Obviously not at the Suns' expense, but I do keep a loose eye on what's happening with West Coast. So, to give you a bit of a backstory, at about the age of 7, I moved to the Gold Coast. My father got a job up there, so he moved my whole family up from Ulverston in Tasmania up to the Gold Coast. Now, I followed when the Suns came in 2011. I followed them, actually, not 2011. I think it was it 2000? So 7 years, I should really know this. It's 2011, 2012. Anyway, the year the Suns came into the AFL, I was still a West Coast fan. For that year, that there was the first year of the Suns, and West Coast were also in the league, obviously. They had that year crossover. I was a West Coast fan, but I always used to watch the Suns games. I used to keep up with the Suns games. So I would watch a West Coast game, watch the Suns game. Suns were my second favourite team. And then got to the end of the year, and I basically have gone. And I can't remember making a conscious decision of I'm not supporting West Coast, but I'm supporting Gold Coast now. And I sort of ever slowly switched over to supporting Gold Coast. And I've never really, being a West Coast supporter, I never really supported the local team. When I lived on the Gold Coast, I'd go up to the Gabba once a year with my dad. That was our big thing. Got to the Gabba once a year. He'd take me to watch the West Coast play Brisbane game at the Gabba, and I saw some absolutely cracking games. That game where Judd kicked 5 goals in the first half was an absolutely amazing game, and me and my dad there were live for that, and that is one of the best games by a single player I've ever seen to this day. And that was the thing we did. So I used to be an absolute diehard West Coast fan, but the idea of supporting the local team really got me going. I got a membership with my dad and my brother, and we used to go every Gold Coast home game. I've dragged a whole bunch of people there. I dragged ex-girlfriends who weren't very happy about going, but I dragged them there. I dragged friends there. I dragged my current wife there to her first game ever after she'd got off the plane that morning, on Saturday morning. It was round 1 against Richmond at Metricon, and I'm like, we've got the best thing to do. While you're jet lagged and while that's going on, you're probably absolutely shattered. You couldn't think of anywhere worse to be in the world. I'm going to take you to a game at Metricon, and we're going to watch the Gold Coast play. And luckily, Gold Coast won that game. I think from memory, Jago Mira absolutely ripped it to shreds that game, and so did Gary Ablett. And that was that year, actually. Gold Coast started the season really well, and then when Gary Ablett went down, that's when the season fell apart. I think it was McKenna's last season in charge. And that's sort of how it happened, and I became an absolutely diehard Gold Coast fan, to the point where I'm now talking about them on the internet. And I've lived overseas. I've lived abroad. I lived 2 years in London. Followed the Gold Coast. Streamed every game I could possibly from London, watching the Gold Coast Suns on the streaming service. Came back to Melbourne, I came back to the Gold Coast, lived there for a couple of, I think, 6 months, went to every game again, then moved to Melbourne and went to every possible Melbourne game I could as a Suns supporter. I went a couple of times by myself because in Melbourne, no one really wants to watch a Suns game, especially when they're god-awful at times. They were god-awful to watch at times. But I did that. I dragged everyone possible to a game, and now I'm back in Manchester. I'm streaming them again. And from the other side of the world, I can even tell that I feel like Stuart Dew has changed the club, and we finally have turned a corner. So as you can probably tell by the way I've talked about that, I'm super excited about the Suns, and I'm super excited about doing this podcast, and I really enjoy talking about it. And I love whenever I get a chance to go home, if it's during football season, I'll always try and squeeze a game in. Last year I went home for my birthday, and I squeezed in a game at Metricon where I watched the Suns lose to Richmond, and they were pretty poor, but just going to the football live once again made me really, really happy. Anyway, that's enough about me going on about the Suns. If you have any other questions you want me to answer about being a Suns fan or the Gold Coast Suns in general, leave me a comment below, and I'll do my best to answer it. Alright, with that out of the way, let's go and talk about this week's game coming up, and that is against Fremantle. So we're playing, let's have a look, we're playing at the Twilight game. Well, it's not Twilight in WA, but it is the Twilight game, and we are matching up against Fremantle. So, our changes for our team. So we've had one change. Jack Bowes is out with suspension. He got suspended for 1 week for a late hit on Wiedering. I don't think... I sort of agree with it. He didn't do any, like, the act of jumping and bumping in the air and looking at the person as you're doing it makes it look like a weak. No, I know at times he had his eye on the ball and he kept moving it, but he looked at Wiedering and then he hit him, so you can't really get away with that. So he got a week. It's kind of annoying, but it's not the worst thing in the world because we've actually got Pierce Hanley coming back in. Now, usually for the first 2 games, Jack Bowes has been playing off the half-back line. So I think Pierce Hanley is a good pick to come in as a replacement, and Pierce Hanley is a proven player, and I reckon he'll slot in really well on that half-back line or even on a wing if we choose to do that. So I reckon that's not a bad switch up. For Fremantle, they've dropped... Bradley Hill has gone out injured, and in has come Tommy Sheridan. And they had a good win against Essendon last week. Now, Essendon don't travel well usually, so how much they can take away from that win, who knows. But I would be, if I was a Fremantle fan, I would be pretty happy with that. So, it's an interesting game. At the start of the week, I would have said that we would struggle to win this game. But as the week's gone on, I've actually gotten more and more confident. With the news of Brad Hill out too is usually a pretty good one as well. So someone's calling me. Probably just a telemarketer. I'm confident. I think we can win. I think we can actually legitimately win this game. It's going to be tough. It's not going to be an easy game by any stretch of the imagination, but I reckon we are capable of winning this game, and I think we will actually win. Now, I'm always going to tip the Suns. That's not going to be a problem, but I reckon I'll tip the Suns by 14 points. I reckon 14 points. It's going to come down to pretty much the forward line and our key forwards and our key backs. Alex Pearce has been in good form for Fremantle. He's kept Joe Danaher as far as sort of possessions. He did a very good job on Joe Danaher last week. So if he can get hold of Lynch, we might struggle a little bit. But we've got Sam Day in the forward line who can also take a grab. And we've got to try and keep their relatively unknown forward line of... Well, Tabin has been around for a while, but he's not an A grader. If we can get Rory Thompson and Stephen May on top of them and get some rebound off our defensive line with Harbrow and Kolajazny and Hanley, I reckon we will do a very, very good job of moving the ball forward and moving it through the midfield and getting it in quickly to Lynch and Day, who will be our main targets. Then you've got like Ainsworth and Sexton and Martin who can also, and even Yaron Young can also all bob up for goals. So overall, I think we're in with a very good chance in this game. Suns by 14 points, and that is going to be it. Then after that, 10 days later, we're actually staying over in WA for this round, and I think that's a pretty good idea. We don't have to, so this saves us from going back to WA later in the year, possibly doing 2 trips to WA in one season. When we can do 1 trip, stay over, and we'll go with that. I remember I was reading something that Stuart Dew said, and he talked about how NBA teams do it, and they travel and they play multiple games over there. And obviously, it's a bit different because NBAs are sort of a very, very different, or basketball's not NBA. Basketball's a very, very different game to AFL. But the idea of traveling somewhere, staying there for an extended period of time, playing 2 games, and coming back so you don't have to do that traveling again is a very, very smart one. And I think it might come into it a bit more, especially if we were to have back-to-back games in Melbourne, which we have done before. We've had back-to-back games in Melbourne, and we've stayed in Melbourne over that 2-week period. So we're doing it this 2 weeks. We have Fremantle, then we also have West Coast later on, and I think it's a good thing. It'll bring the team together. The team is sort of gelling together really well, and I understand that we're not a finals team, and I'm not ever saying we're a finals team, but this sort of stuff is what builds teams. So the work we put in now over the next 10 days and bonding and grouping together and coming together as a team will hopefully pay off towards the end of this year or next year when the team's bonded and we're all on the same page, and we're moving forward with another strong year, hopefully next season, and that is the year I reckon we will push for finals. Anyway, guys, that's my thoughts. That is an episode of Sundown. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure, as I said at the start of the video, like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of the videos on this channel. Let me know any questions you have in the comments below. Who do you think? Do you think the Suns are in for a good year? Do you think the Suns can finish in the top 8? Or do you think, like me, they're probably going to finish just short? I reckon Suns are going to finish about between 10 and 12, which is, I think, would be a good season for us. A bit of an improvement to be seen, and hopefully that means keeping hold of Tom Lynch, which everyone wants to know about. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you later.